The Caribbean is in a unique position when it comes to tourism. Tourism is a large part of what makes the Caribbean money. The Caribbean is a beautiful place, and we allow some people to pay us money to come to this beautiful Caribbean and witness some of it with us. Now, on the other hand, we in the Caribbean haven't all witnessed the entirety of the Caribbean. And I think, to go back to one of my favorite points, I think increasing the accessibility of the Caribbean would increase the unity of the Caribbean too. If people within the Caribbean are able to visit the other islands easier, I am sure that they would have a higher affinity to islands that they can go to. Some island where you go once every year, you take a weekend and go to this specific island, then you would have actual interest in the betterment of that island. What goes on in that island would be of value to you. So I am in agreement with Caricom, the leaders of Caricom, in nearly just about anything they can do to decrease the difficulty in accessing islands, especially for Caricom members. And it seems like more and more states are jumping onto this. If you don't know what I'm speaking about, you clearly haven't been watching many of my videos. Also, I apologize for missing yesterday. That's just about it. My apologies. Consider this yesterday's video then, and probably another video would be today's. So yes, many of the CARICOM leaders appear to be coming along and coming on board with the decreasing of the taxes when it comes to the airports and increasing the availability of inter-island travel, really and truly. I'm looking at Caribbean Airlines, and they're talking about their bookings being low, but it's no surprise. Now, that's of course no surprise. The borders have recently been reopened, so you'd expect there to be some fluctuation in the amount of traffic, in the amount of persons being interested, and especially with there being that bit of difficulties in vaccination or being unvaccinated, that adding another layer to transport and international transport especially, there's no surprise that there's some slowness in the restart. Caribbean Airlines, bookings down, but it's not surprising. If you haven't clicked like on the video yet, don't forget to do just that. Smash in that like button. Make sure you click it well. Make sure it's clicked. Don't click it twice and unclick it. Just click that like button and leave a comment if you have a comment to be left. And if you're listening and not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe. Also, Caribbean Airlines has reported a downward trend in bookings both on arrivals and departures. Though it's only been a week and 2 days since the country's national carrier has been able to take to the sky again, CAL's corporate communications head, Dion Lega, confirmed the reduction. When asked what measures CAL would be taking to stimulate demand, Lega said, due to that information being competitively sensitive, she would prefer not to disclose such details at this time. So there's a suggestion there that they are going to do some things to increase or stimulate the demand. We could be looking out for that, and especially if it's on the heels of some decrease in the airline taxes, in the airport taxes, that would be some interesting stuff. She said CAL would continue to monitor closely bookings on both ends of the scale, arrivals and departures. She assured all stakeholders continue to work together to ensure customers enjoy a safe and comfortable experience. Since the reopening of Trinidad and Tobago's borders and the resumption of travel, which began on July 17th, Lega said from July 17th to July 25th, the total number of international flights outbound was 43, while the total number of international flights inbound was 42. Now, when we look and see that Caribbean Airlines has lower demand, and that's expected, especially when it comes to international flight, I'm not sure many of the regular flyers may just want to go on an international flight for simple entertainment and recreational purposes right now. That may be a lower number of people than usual. But I would estimate that if you were to offer flights within the Caribbean, I think more people would take that even on just plain entertainment and recreation levels. People who may even be apprehensive right now about flying further away from the Caribbean, because there's still a within the home bounds feel if you're in the Caribbean. So, and who knows, we may be able to test that theory soon enough. Regional leaders cutting air taxes to encourage intra-Caribbean tourism. This is an article from the Jamaican Gleaner. I think it covered a pretty wide base, so it should be interesting. Mike Holder, a Barbadian accountant, proudly recalls the days in the 1990s through the early noughties when he and a group of friends would, on a whim, book a flight, and spend the weekend in St. Lucia. Now, I just never quite got around to saying noughties, Noughties just doesn't roll off the tongue. Okay, 80s, 90s, and I understand why you say noughties, but really, I go with the 2000s. I'm sorry, the 2000s just makes more sense to me. Noughties. Naughties sounds like the language of an inappropriate secondary school teacher. Back then, a return ticket between the countries cost under US $150. Attractive enough for Mike and his friends to engage in those weekend getaways between 6 and 8 times a year. That's between Barbados and St. Lucia back then was less than US $150. In TT, that would be somewhere around $1,000. So, can you imagine if you could get a return flight to a Caribbean island, to another Caribbean territory for $1,000? A lot of people would do that. In Trinidad, many times some people go and spend some money on some one night out, and many people may cross that $1,000 bill in short time. That isn't a lot if you're talking recreational spending and entertainment spending. And if a flight is $1,000 return trip to a Caribbean island, let's round it off to something that sounds like a real airfare cost. It's $1,200 return flight to Jamaica. You think more people wouldn't take that flight? I'm sure, at least in Trinidad, 100% more people are taking that flight. You can understand how you could just get on a plane Friday evening after work and come back either early Monday morning or late Sunday evening, he told the Sunday Gleaner. Over time, as governments imposed a series of taxes and charges on airline tickets, sending fares ballooning beyond the reach of many, Mike and his friends cut back on the weekend trips until they stopped altogether. Now, this is one of my problems I have with governments. I am of the view a lot of the problems in the world are caused simply by governments, and a lot of the solutions would be had if the governments just got out of the way. I think it is a lie that many people, many citizens in many different countries have been convinced that many things within their country could only function and can only function well if the government is running it. Now, let's think about that for a bit. The government is made up of people. These people have managerial and administrative skills. Do you think that these people have the best managerial and administrative skills in any particular field? And if they do, wouldn't it make more sense on a free market to judge that? Let's think about it. If you have a government in charge, if the government was totally in charge of the cell phone industry, all of the cell phone carriers were just by the government. Anyone who is older than 30, older than probably 27, could remember the days of only TSTT before Digicel arrived. Was it better or worse? And can you imagine if we could get less government involvement in things and it's more just private? And when I say, many times when people say private, I think they only picture super large multinational corporations. But private is you and I. Private is the individual. And if you look at what the governments did by increasing these taxes, okay, they took in some more income to the countries. Now, the citizens from the Caribbean countries may be the ones who would have to see whether, when they look across around their countries and their territories, whether they think that the increased money the government took with these taxes, whether they used it correctly. But that's up to each individual citizen. But if you look at the deterrence factor of increasing these taxes, they would have taken money out of the pockets of many different people, because these young folks that speak about back in the 90s and the 2000s, that naughty business done, the 2000s, speak about flying into Ireland for over a weekend. What do you think they were doing during that weekend? they were spending money in these islands. And now, especially with the ballooning of the young professional class in the entirety of the Caribbean, and particularly in Trinidad, and I believe particularly in Jamaica too, there are lots of people now in this young professional class. And this young professional class spends money like drug dealers, because a lot of them didn't really take into that training, of that miserly training of the generations gone before. When they touch down to spend, they spend. So could you imagine what would be happening if you have these groups just going to take weekends over in islands? That would be increasing that would be spinning the economy of some of these islands. And the government, by taking this tax, what they are effectively doing is, well, at least attempting to, let's say the 1,200 in ticket plus $1,000 they were going to spend on the island, the 2,200 that would have previously been spent totally on the island, the government is attempting to cream off some of that, put it in their pocket, and hopefully still get the person to come and spend that money on the island. And the person doesn't come. So by the person refusing to come, they don't even get that money in the taxes, and it becomes an overall loss for the country. So how is that beneficial in the long-term sense? Many times the taxes that many of the governments use, when I look at historically the timeline of them, they don't actually bear out to be positive things. I have not been to St. Lucia since 2007, stated Mike, who explained that even then it was for work purposes. As I said, $1,000 nested over a weekend didn't make any sense. Mike is not alone in this. For nearly 2 decades, virtually every Caribbean national or resident who travels for business or leisure has complained about the high cost of travel across the region. In many instances, these taxes account for up to 60% of the AFA, pushing the cost of travel to neighboring countries past the fares above those to Miami or New York. Now, how does that make any kind of sense to anyone? It's more expensive for me to travel to a Caribbean country than for me to travel to a foreign region, to a whole different country. That doesn't make sense. The COVID-19 window. Despite the chorus of voices raised in opposition to the high taxes and the pleadings of regional bodies such as the Barbados-based Caribbean Tourism Organization, Caribbean leaders and ministers of finance refused to budge until now. Facing a near collapse of the tourism industry due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Caricom leaders at their 42nd regular meeting held via video conference on July 5th to 6, 2021, agreed to consider proposals to reduce taxes and travel for a pilot period of 6 months, in addition to encouraging airlines not to raise fares in such a manner as to negate the market benefit that would be derived from the reduction in travel taxes. Now, what I don't understand about some of these things, and they speak about how it's my buddy over in Antigua there, Mr. Gaston Brown, who has been pushing this idea. Congratulations to him on this, and I hope it reaches to the fullest extent of it. I don't even understand why they make it seem like this is such a difficult and hard decision to make. I don't know if I'm just missing from the corridors of governance and I don't understand these high level decisions, but I don't understand why it took a COVID-19 pandemic and the tourism industry nearly falling apart to see that maybe this was beneficial. Because the way I see it, if it is beneficial during this time when the tourism industry may be falling apart, wouldn't it have been beneficial basically all along? That's at least the way I see it. Conflicting positions. Caricom governments have adopted conflicting positions on air passenger taxes, raising these duties on travelers to and from their countries while fighting similar taxes imposed on travel to the region by other jurisdictions. Between 2010 and 2014, the region fought an unrelenting battle against Britain's air passenger duty, charging then that the steep tax was a burden on potential travelers. A study by the CTO at the time found that the APD was negatively impacting travel from Britain to the Caribbean. I think that's a bit of hypocrisy on the government side. If you taxing us citizens to travel into Ireland, then why are you complaining so much when Britain taxes people to travel to Britain? Isn't that based on the same principle you're using? And if that was negatively affecting travel between the Caribbean and Britain, what do you think the high taxes in the Caribbean were doing? Geniuses. In support of efforts to encourage intra-regional travel, an earlier survey conducted by the CTO in the mid-1990s found that Caribbean nationals who visit other regional states spent more on average than international tourists. 20 years later, the findings were the same when the sub-regional group, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, commissioned a study in 2015 on the factors that impeded travel among the subgrouping. You see that we Caribbean people, I insinuated this without even knowing that this study was there. The Caribbean people, when they go to their neighboring islands, spend more even than the international tourists. I'm not surprised by that. If I go to St. Lucia, I may have more impetus to buy more things in St. Lucia than an international tourist. At least that's the way I see it, and that's at least the way that the studies seem to bear out. Both the studies in the 90s and the study that was more recently commissioned in 2015. There was sufficient evidence for us to demonstrate the OECS travelers were producing more money than the international tourists, noted Ian Bertrand, a Trinidadian aviation consultant and former CEO of BWIE. The study also found that travel within the region would increase if the governments lowered the taxes, revealed Bertrand, who at the time recommended reducing the taxes and fees over a trial period. We look at the losses in taxes from the airports and compared it to the gain in hotel tax and all the various other taxes on land that the country benefits from, and it was positive, said the aviation consultant. Even with this glaring evidence before them, the ministers of finance, including Brown, who was his country's finance minister at the time, could not be convinced to take the plunge and reduce the taxes. I think I hate taxes all through, you know. Like I don't see I could see the benefits in taxes, but even in a lot of those things, I think many taxes, when you put them into specific areas, they have the same effect that this does. It decreases people wanting to spend that money. People have limited amounts of money to spend. If you attempt to tax them more, it's not going to make them produce more money and give the government an increased amount in terms of they are now producing money and giving more to the country. It's a percentage of the same amount that they were always producing all along. And if they have, let's think of it as if they have a total of 10 of anything to spend. If you tax them one and they were going to spend the 9 other, they would have spent that 9 other within the system. If you tax them 5, they would still spend only 5 other within the system. So the way I see it, when the government increases the tax from 1 to that 5, the 4 that disappears from the system disappears from the pockets of the everyday private citizens in the system and goes into the proverbial pockets of the government. Now, I understand that the government needs resources, but when you could, at least I can see with pretty clear clarity and surety that governments are some of the most inefficient spenders in the world, then I would presume that the added 4 that the government took out in taxes would have been better spent and better allocated if you left it with the private citizen. They would have had a much more efficient use of that 4 than we give it to the government and they go and spend it on random helicopters that they have to buy at too expensive a cost and sell at too cheap a cost. The government doesn't spend money efficiently, so why give them more? The main disadvantage that seems to have been raised with this article was that it could offer an unfair advantage. Jamaica has yet to indicate whether it will join Antigua and Barbados in cutting the taxes, although Riley is hopeful that as a leader in Caribbean tourism, it would be an incredible thing if Jamaica would do that. Edmund Ed Bartlett, the Jamaican tourism minister, while choosing to leave any discussion on the matter to the Prime Minister, said there were benefits to affordable airfares. Doubtlessly, low airfares will have a positive effect on the domestic travel in the region. However, we have to be careful that in crafting these arrangements, it does not have a counter-cyclical effect on international travel in the region. And he, along with some other people in that space, went on to speak about the possibility that the international airlines may feel hard done if the Caribbean territories decrease their taxes. They would feel like there's an unfair advantage to the regional airlines. And so what? I don't understand what that would change exactly. that wouldn't increase the taxes on the international airlines. If they were making a profit by flying to this region, they wouldn't now decrease that profit by flying to the region. They would still make the same amount. I think that's a pandering excuse, and I think that once a government gets power, once a government increases the taxes, once a government increases the take of resources from their citizens, it's very hard at any point in the future to attempt to get them to decrease it. What do you think? Don't forget to drop that comment, and I'll see you again for the next video.
Feel the music rising with the time.